I'm Morgan Reynolds, 34, a systems analyst living in a modest apartment despite my secret success. Never thought my ordinary life would collide with a banking glitch that would expose billions in financial vulnerabilities. It all started when my car broke down, and I needed $150. A simple request that my condescending sister Amanda laughed at. Little did she know, this small moment would spiral into national headlines and shatter our family dynamic forever. Before I tell you how my ordinary request exposed a banking scandal that made national headlines, take a second to subscribe if you enjoy stories about karma catching up to people who deserve it. Let me know where you're watching from. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts, our family looked picture perfect from the outside. My father Richard worked as an accountant, meticulous with numbers and teaching us the value of every dollar earned. Mom, Elizabeth, was an elementary school teacher who brought creativity and warmth to our home. They weren't wealthy, but we never lacked necessities. Their careful budgeting and occasional splurges on family vacations taught us both about financial balance. But within our family dynamic, the contrast between my sister Amanda and me couldn't have been more pronounced. Amanda, 3 years my senior, emerged early as the golden child. With her natural beauty, outgoing personality, and effortless academic achievements, she commanded attention in any room. School came easily to her. Valedictorian, student body president, homecoming queen, the entire package of traditional success that parents proudly display on bumper stickers. I existed in her shadow. Quieter, more analytical, I found my place behind computer screens rather than in social spotlights. It wasn't that I lacked intelligence. My mind simply worked differently. Where Amanda excelled at memorization and presentation, I saw patterns and systems. Our parents tried to balance their attention between us, but Amanda's achievements naturally demanded celebration, while my interests seemed more obscure. Your sister's giving the graduation speech this weekend, my mom would announce proudly to relatives. Meanwhile, my coding competition victories earned puzzled nods and generic "that's nice, dear" responses. Our divergent paths became more pronounced after high school. Amanda attended Dartmouth on partial scholarship, joining the right sorority and making connections that would serve her social and professional aspirations. She graduated with honors, quickly landed a marketing position at a prestigious firm, and within 2 years, married Jackson Harper, handsome, wealthy, from a good family as my parents noted approvingly. I chose the state university, majoring in computer science. My parents seemed mildly disappointed by my choice, suggesting perhaps I aim higher like Amanda. They didn't understand that the program's specialized focus on financial system security was exactly what I wanted. College was where I thrived, finally finding peers who spoke my language of algorithms and data structures. I graduated with minimal debt and accepted a remote position with a financial software company. Our adult lives reflected our different values. Amanda and Jackson purchased a colonial-style mansion in an exclusive neighborhood, complete with a 3-car garage housing his and hers luxury vehicles. Her Instagram feed became a carefully curated showcase of perfection. Exotic vacations, charity galas, designer outfits, and eventually 2 photogenic children who always appeared spotlessly clean and well-behaved. I chose a modest 2-bedroom apartment that accommodated my home office needs. The second bedroom housed my true passion, a custom-built computer setup where I developed financial tracking systems in my spare time. One of those side projects caught the attention of investors, and through a series of fortunate events, I received substantial stock options when the company went public. Suddenly, I had wealth that rivaled Amanda's household. But unlike her, I kept this information private, maintaining my simple lifestyle. Our interactions grew increasingly strained over the years. Family gatherings became exercises in patience, as Amanda delivered subtle jabs disguised as concern. "Still at that same company? I thought you'd have moved up by now," she'd say, sipping expensive wine. Or, "Morgan, I know this great matchmaker if you're ready to finally settle down." 34 isn't too late to start a family, though you shouldn't wait much longer. My parents would nod along, seemingly agreeing that my life needed Amanda's improvements. They never questioned her wisdom, even as her comments grew more transparent. Last Thanksgiving showcased Amanda at her most performative. She arrived with homemade organic pumpkin pies. Store-bought is just loaded with preservatives. Immediately rearranging Mom's table setting to accommodate her superior decorative items. Throughout dinner, she dominated conversation with stories of Jackson's recent promotion, their children's gifted program achievements, and their upcoming ski trip to Aspen. "We should all go somewhere together next year," she suggested magnanimously. "We could help with your airfare, Morgan. I know things must be tight on a single income." I simply smiled and changed the subject. The truth was, I could have purchased the entire ski resort without impacting my net worth significantly. But that revelation would have disrupted the family dynamic Amanda so carefully maintained, where her superiority remained unquestioned. Sometimes, I wondered why I maintained the charade. Perhaps it was simpler than challenging established patterns. Perhaps I derived some satisfaction from knowing the truth while Amanda performed for approval she already had. Or perhaps I was waiting for the right moment to shift the balance between us, though I never imagined how dramatically that shift would eventually occur. As I drove home from that Thanksgiving gathering, my car making an ominous rattling sound that would soon become significant, I reflected on the emotional distance between Amanda and me. Despite sharing childhood experiences and DNA, we had become virtual strangers, connected only by obligation and shared parents. The thought brought both sadness and resignation. Some relationships simply weren't destined for depth, I reasoned, even among family. I had no idea how soon that relationship would be tested and transformed by circumstances neither of us could have predicted. The following Tuesday, my 10-year-old Toyota decided it had endured enough winter commutes. As I navigated the morning traffic, the engine produced a concerning metallic grinding before shuddering dramatically and going silent. I managed to coast to the roadside, narrowly avoiding becoming a traffic obstruction. After calling roadside assistance, I received the tow truck driver's assessment with resignation. "Head gaskets blown. You're looking at serious engine work." The mechanic at the garage provided more detailed analysis and a temporary solution. "Full repair will take time with parts being ordered, but I can get you back on the road temporarily for $150. It won't be pretty, but it'll get you home and to work for a few weeks until we can do the complete job." Ordinarily, $150 wouldn't have presented a problem. However, my financial timing couldn't have been worse. I had recently transferred a significant portion of my liquid assets into a new investment portfolio that had a mandatory 30-day holding period. Additionally, I was awaiting reimbursement for a major business expense from the previous week. My checking account contained just $43.78, not sufficient for groceries until payday, but not for unexpected car repairs. I considered my options. Credit cards were out. I had recently canceled them after discovering suspicious activity. My emergency fund was tied up in the investment transition. I could wait for the complete repair, but that meant working from home for at least 2 weeks, missing critical in-person meetings. After exhausting other possibilities, I reluctantly considered asking family for help. My parents were vacationing in Europe, an anniversary trip they'd saved years for. Contacting them over $150 seemed unnecessarily disruptive. That left Amanda. Despite our strained relationship, she was family. The loan would be temporary, just until Friday's direct deposit or the expense reimbursement arrived. Surely, even Amanda could spare $150 without judgment. With the mechanic waiting for my decision, I stepped outside and called my sister. "Amanda, it's Morgan." "Well, this is unexpected. Everything okay?" Her voice carried that familiar note of condescension, as though my calling necessarily indicated crisis. "Actually, I'm having a minor car issue. The mechanic can get me back on the road for $150, but I'm temporarily short on cash until Friday. My cards were compromised last week, and I'm waiting on." She cut me off with a laugh. "You're calling to ask me for money?" "Oh, Morgan." The way she said my name, like I was a disappointing child, made my cheeks burn despite the winter chill. "It's just until Friday," I explained. 3 days. I'll pay you back immediately. I'm sure you will, Amanda replied, her tone making clear she didn't consider $150 significant enough to track. But honestly, Morgan, don't you think this is part of a larger problem? Jackson and I were just discussing how people get trapped in cycles of financial instability. I gripped my phone tighter. This isn't a cycle, Amanda. It's a timing issue with. You should really have emergency savings, you know. We keep 6 months of expenses liquid at all times. Jackson says that's just basic financial planning. The lecture continued as she detailed their robust financial strategy, complete with investment diversification advice I could have given in my sleep. The irony of her explaining financial principles to me, whose software had revolutionized portfolio tracking for thousands of investors, might have been amusing under different circumstances. Look, if you can't help, just say so, I finally interrupted. It's not that I can't help, she replied, affronted. It's that I shouldn't. This is a teaching moment, Morgan. If I bail you out, you'll never learn proper financial management. Through the phone came the sound of her kitchen remodeling. A project she'd mentioned cost more than most people's entire homes. You know what's interesting? She continued, warming to her subject. People in your situation often waste money without realizing it, like those fancy coffee drinks or subscription services. They add up. I don't buy fancy coffee, I said flatly, and I need to go. The mechanic's waiting. Well, perhaps this inconvenience will inspire better planning, she said cheerfully. Sometimes we need these little wake-up calls. Jackson has some great books on personal finance he could recommend. I'll have him email you the titles. Don't bother, I replied, struggling to maintain civility. Morgan, there's no need for attitude. I'm trying to help in a more meaningful way than just throwing money at the problem. After ending the call, I stood in the garage parking lot, processing the conversation. The humiliation burned worse than the cold. It wasn't the money itself. $150 was objectively insignificant to both of us, but rather Amanda's need to assert superiority, to position herself as the financial sage, while assuming my incompetence. What bothered me most was knowing that if our situations were reversed, I would have helped her without question or lecture. That fundamental difference in how we approached family relationships suddenly seemed unbridgeable. I returned to the mechanic's office, explained I'd make alternative arrangements, and requested an Uber. During the ride home, I decided to withdraw a small amount from my investment account. The penalty would be annoying but less painful than further interactions with Amanda. After arriving home, I settled at my computer and logged into my banking portal, still ruminating on Amanda's condescension. As the page loaded, I prepared to navigate the early withdrawal process, my mind already calculating the penalty fees against the satisfaction of solving my problem without my sister's help. But as the account details populated on the screen, something caught my attention that would transform an ordinary financial inconvenience into an extraordinary chain of events that neither Amanda nor I could have anticipated. The numbers on my screen didn't match my records, not even close. At first, I assumed I had logged into the wrong account. I double-checked the account number, definitely mine. Then I thought perhaps there had been a deposit error. Maybe my reimbursement had processed early and with an extra digit. But the transaction history showed no recent deposits. The balance displayed wasn't just slightly off, it was astronomically different. Where I expected to see my investment balance of approximately $2.3 million, the screen showed account balance $4,237,698,514.22, over $4 billion. In my personal investment account, that's not possible, I murmured to the empty room, my car troubles momentarily forgotten. Years of working with financial systems had trained me to approach anomalies methodically. I cleared my cache and cookies, then logged in again. Same balance. I tried a different browser. Still, $4.2 billion. I even restarted my computer completely, but the impossible figure remained. I switched to my phone app, .com. Sometimes the mobile interface pulled from a different server. The app initially showed my expected balance, but after refreshing, it synchronized with the website's figure. This wasn't a simple display error. I pulled up the detailed account information page and began examining every transaction, account link, and system identifier. 20 minutes into my investigation, I spotted something unusual, an unfamiliar alphanumeric code embedded in my account's reference field. It resembled an internal routing identifier, but with a structure I didn't recognize. Drawing on my systems analysis background, I began documenting everything, taking screenshots and noting timestamps. I compared the mystery identifier against standard banking codes. No matches. It wasn't until I ran it through a pattern recognition algorithm I'd developed that I got a partial match. The prefix matched identifiers used by corporate holding accounts for one of the country's largest investment firms, a company my bank had recently merged with. The realization hit me. Through some back-end integration error, my personal account had been incorrectly linked to a corporate holding account. I was seeing not just my money, but the combined assets of potentially thousands of clients. My immediate thought was security implications. If I could see this money, could I move it? The ethical person would report this immediately, but the systems analyst needed to understand the extent of the vulnerability. I navigated to the transfer page and set up a test. $150 to my checking account, exactly what I needed for my car repair. I hesitated before confirming, my finger hovering over the mouse button. This would cross a line from observation to interaction. But if the system allowed this transaction, the security breach was far more severe than a display error. I clicked transfer. The system processed for several seconds longer than usual, then displayed transfer complete. My checking account immediately showed the deposit. I sat back, both fascinated and alarmed. I hadn't just discovered a display glitch, I'd uncovered a catastrophic security vulnerability in one of the nation's largest financial institutions. The system had actually allowed me to transfer money from a corporate account into my personal checking. The implications were staggering. If I could move $150, what prevented me from moving millions? Or someone else with less ethical concerns from doing the same? This wasn't just a curious anomaly. It was potentially the largest banking security hole I'd ever encountered. Professional responsibility dictated immediate reporting. I navigated to the customer service contact page and called the general support line. "Thank you for calling Central Atlantic Banking. This is Trevor. How may I assist you today?" The representative sounded young and scripted. "I need to report a major security vulnerability in your system," I began, keeping my voice calm but authoritative. "I'd be happy to help with any account issues," Trevor replied cheerfully. "Can I get your account number and verify your identity first?" I provided the requested information, then attempted to explain the situation. "My investment account is showing an incorrect balance of over $4 billion. I've verified this isn't a display error. The system actually allowed me to transfer funds from this incorrect balance." Let me see. There was typing on the other end. "Your accounts appear to be functioning normally. Sometimes the display might temporarily show incorrect information due to system updates. Have you tried logging out and back in?" "Yes, I've tried that, and several other troubleshooting steps," I explained. Frustration building. "This isn't a minor display issue. I believe your system has incorrectly linked my account to corporate holdings during your recent merger integration." "I don't see any notes about system integration affecting customer accounts," Trevor replied doubtfully. "Our merger technology update was completed last month without incident." For 15 minutes, I attempted to convey the seriousness of the situation while Trevor followed his script for routine display problems. When I mentioned the test transfer, his tone shifted slightly. "You attempted an unauthorized transfer from an account showing an incorrect balance?" The question carried a subtle accusation. "I transferred $150 to verify whether this was merely a display error or an actual system vulnerability," I clarified. As a cybersecurity professional, I needed to understand the scope of the issue before reporting it. "I see." His voice cooled further. "Well, any discrepancies will be corrected during overnight processing. Unauthorized transactions would naturally be reversed." It became clear that Trevor either didn't understand the technical implications or wasn't authorized to escalate appropriately. I asked to speak with a technical supervisor. All supervisors are currently assisting other customers, he informed me. I can schedule a callback within 3 business days. 3 days for a vulnerability of this magnitude was unacceptable. I thanked Trevor and ended the call, immediately trying the bank's security department directly. That resulted in an automated message instructing me to report security concerns through general customer service. After an hour of circular attempts to report the issue through proper channels, I faced a decision. The bank wasn't taking me seriously as an ordinary customer. Perhaps they needed more compelling evidence of the vulnerability's severity. I returned to the transfer screen and stared at the balance. $4,237,698,514.22. If a $150 transfer didn't trigger proper attention, what would? The answer was obvious, though extreme. With precise keystrokes, I set up a new transfer for exactly $4.2 billion, not to my checking account, but to a separate investment account with another institution. I didn't intend to complete this transfer, of course. I merely wanted to see if the system would flag such an outrageous request. I hit Preview Transfer, expecting an immediate error message. Instead, the screen displayed Transfer Pending Approval with a processing animation. For approximately 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then my phone rang, a number identified as Central Atlantic Banking Security Division. I had finally gotten their attention. "This is Diane Reynolds from Central Atlantic Banking Security Division. Am I speaking with Morgan Reynolds?" The woman's voice was sharp, professional, and unmistakably concerned. "Yes, this is Morgan," I confirmed, relieved to finally reach someone who might understand the situation. "Miss Reynolds, we're calling regarding unusual activity detected on your investment account. Our systems have flagged an attempted transfer of $4.2 billion. Can you confirm whether you initiated this transaction?" "I did initiate it," I stated clearly, "but not with the intention of completing it. I've been trying for over an hour to report a critical security vulnerability in your system. Your customer service representatives dismissed my concerns, so I escalated the demonstration to prove the severity." There was a moment of silence before Diane responded, her tone notably colder. "So you're admitting to deliberately attempting to transfer funds you know aren't yours?" This wasn't going as planned. "No, I'm reporting a security vulnerability as a good faith actor. Your system has erroneously linked my personal account to corporate holdings, allowing me to initiate transfers from funds that shouldn't be accessible to me. I'm trying to alert you to this problem before someone with malicious intent discovers it. Miss Reynolds, all transactions are being immediately reversed, and we're initiating emergency protocols. Please remain available at this number. A security team will contact you shortly." The call ended abruptly. Within minutes, I received a notification that all my accounts, not just the affected investment account, but my legitimate checking and savings accounts as well, had been frozen pending security investigation. Just like that, I had no access to any of my money, including the original $150 I needed for my car repair. The promised call came 20 minutes later, this time from Marcus Whitfield, identified as Deputy Head of Security Operations. "Miss Reynolds, I'm looking at some very disturbing activity on your accounts," he began without preamble. "Our system shows you accessed a restricted corporate holding account and attempted to transfer $4.2 billion to an external institution. These actions potentially violate numerous banking regulations and federal laws." I took a deep breath. "Mr. Whitfield, I'm a systems analyst specializing in financial software security. What I discovered was an integration error in your recent merger that incorrectly mapped my personal account to corporate holdings. I made multiple attempts to report this through proper channels before demonstrating the vulnerability's severity. And you demonstrated this by attempting to transfer billions of dollars?" His skepticism was palpable. "I needed to trigger your security protocols since customer service wasn't escalating my reports appropriately. I had no intention of completing that transfer. Yet you did complete a transfer of $150 earlier. As a minimal test to confirm this wasn't merely a display error, That amount equals precisely what I needed for a car repair today. I can provide the mechanic's estimate as verification. The conversation continued in this adversarial manner for nearly an hour, with Whitfield's questions becoming increasingly technical. As I explained the specific identifiers and system behaviors I'd observed, his tone gradually shifted from accusatory to concern. If what you're describing is accurate, Miss Reynolds, this represents a significant security incident. Our technical team is investigating, but I must inform you that all your accounts will remain frozen during this process. I understand freezing the investment account showing the incorrect balance, I countered. But my checking and savings accounts are unrelated to this issue. I literally have no access to any funds right now. It's standard procedure during potential fraud investigations. I recommend making alternative financial arrangements until this matter is resolved. The irony was painful. The $150 I couldn't get from my sister had spiraled into having millions of my legitimate assets frozen indefinitely. As our call concluded, my email alert chimed with an automated message from Central Atlantic Banking. Important notice. Online banking temporarily unavailable for scheduled maintenance. Curious timing for scheduled maintenance. I opened my banking app to find it completely offline. Checking financial news sites, I soon found reports emerging about a major outage affecting all Central Atlantic banking digital services. The vulnerability I discovered had apparently triggered a system-wide shutdown. My phone rang again, Amanda's name on the display. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but perhaps she'd reconsidered the loan. Morgan, what have you done now? Her voice dripped with condescension before I could even say hello. What are you talking about? Jackson just got an alert that Central Atlantic is experiencing technical difficulties affecting all their systems. He says it's unprecedented during business hours. And mysteriously, this happens right after you're begging for money because of supposed account problems? Please tell me you haven't done something stupid. The accusation stung, especially given the actual situation. Amanda, I didn't create their technical problems. I discovered them. Right, she scoffed. Because the bank's entire system would have errors that only affect you. That makes perfect sense. Actually, it does make sense given the nature of the integration error I found. Not that you'd understand the technical aspects. Oh, I understand enough. You've clearly overdrawn your account, or triggered some fraud alert with irregular activity, and now you're embarrassed. It's exactly what happens when people don't manage their finances properly. My patience evaporated. Amanda, you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. This isn't about my financial management. Then what exactly is it about, Morgan? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're having a financial crisis so severe you've somehow crashed your bank system trying to get $150 you don't have. Do you really want to know? Fine. I discovered a critical security vulnerability in Central Atlantic's system that incorrectly linked my investment account to corporate holdings worth billions. When I attempted to report it, they dismissed me until I proved the severity by initiating a transfer large enough to trigger security protocols. Now they've frozen all my accounts while they investigate, and apparently taken their entire system offline to patch the vulnerability. Silence stretched between us for several seconds before Amanda laughed. Wow, that's creative. Billions of dollars? Really, Morgan? I knew you were frustrated with your situation, but inventing conspiracy theories is concerning. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a technical error I discovered because I understand financial systems. Right, because you're secretly a banking genius working from your little apartment, Amanda snorted. Maybe it's time to consider talking to someone. Professional help, I mean. This financial stress is clearly affecting you. I don't need professional help, Amanda. What I needed was $150, and perhaps a sister who didn't immediately assume the worst about me. I'm going to tell Mom and Dad you're having some difficulties right now, she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. They should know you're under strain. Don't you dare present this to our parents as some kind of mental health crisis, I warned. This is a legitimate banking issue that I discovered because of my technical expertise. Sure it is. Billions of dollars. Secret banking conspiracies. Very legitimate. Her tone dripped sarcasm. Jackson says Central Atlantic stock is already dropping because of this technical issue you supposedly discovered. Real people with real investments are being affected, Morgan. That's precisely why I tried to report it properly before demonstrating the vulnerability. I'm hanging up now. I'm genuinely worried about you, but I can't support these delusions. When you're ready to accept help and face reality, call me back. The call ended, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. Within minutes, my parents called, clearly already briefed by Amanda on my supposed mental breakdown. By evening, I'd received concerned messages from extended family members, asking if I needed anything during this difficult time. Amanda had effectively undermined my credibility with our entire family before the bank had even completed its investigation. My reputation and relationships were collapsing alongside my financial access, all because I discovered a glitch that no one wanted to believe existed. As I prepared for bed that night, unable to even order delivery food with all my accounts frozen, my email pinged with a message from Central Atlantic Banking's executive office requesting an urgent meeting at their headquarters the following morning. The message included a line that confirmed my suspicions about the true nature of the scheduled maintenance. Our preliminary investigation has identified significant irregularities consistent with your report. We request your complete discretion regarding this matter, pending further discussion. The bank had discovered I was right, but that knowledge provided little comfort as I fell asleep hungry, isolated, and uncertain of what the coming day would bring. Morning arrived with a cascade of notifications. Overnight, what began as a technical issue at Central Atlantic had evolved into what financial news outlets were calling a potential system-wide vulnerability. My phone displayed missed calls from Amanda, my parents, and several numbers I didn't recognize. With all my financial accounts still frozen, I faced the practical challenge of getting to the bank's downtown headquarters without money for transportation. My car remained at the mechanic's shop. Public transit required fare I couldn't access, and ride-sharing apps were linked to my now-frozen cards. After considering limited options, I emailed my contact at Central Atlantic, explaining my predicament. Within 30 minutes, a sleek black car arrived outside my apartment building, courtesy of the bank. The driver maintained professional silence during our journey, but I noticed him glancing at me in the rearview mirror with undisguised curiosity. Perhaps he'd been informed of my connection to the crisis, or maybe executive car services weren't typically dispatched to modest apartment buildings in my neighborhood. Downtown, financial district employees hurried along sidewalks, many speaking urgently into phones. Outside Central Atlantic's imposing headquarters, a small group of journalists had gathered, suggesting news of the situation had spread beyond typical banking circles. In the lobby, a security officer checked my ID before escorting me directly to a private elevator that required keycard access. We ascended to the executive floor in silence, the officer's rigid posture conveying the day's tension. The elevator opened to reveal a reception area where 3 people waited: a woman in her 50s with an impeccable suit and severe expression, a younger man clutching a tablet, and a middle-aged man whose rumpled appearance suggested he hadn't left the building overnight. "Miss Reynolds," the woman stepped forward, extending her hand. "Eleanor Blackwood, Chief Operations Officer. This is David Chen, our head of cybersecurity, and Thomas Wright, from legal." She gestured to her companions. "Thank you for coming in person. We have a situation that requires immediate attention." They led me to a conference room, where several screens displayed financial data, system logs, and what appeared to be real-time monitoring of network activity. A wall-mounted television silently showed CNBC, where analysts gestured over graphics of Central Atlantic's plummeting stock price. "Miss Reynolds," Eleanor began once we were seated, "before we proceed, I need to clarify. You attempted to report a security vulnerability multiple times before escalating to the transfer demonstration?" "Yes," I confirmed. "I spoke with customer service, requested technical support, and attempted to reach your security department directly. I only initiated the large transfer to trigger security protocols after exhausting official channels." David, the cybersecurity head, nodded. "We've verified your call records and the service representative's notes. Unfortunately, your concerns were categorized as a routine display error rather than escalated appropriately. Our preliminary investigation confirms your assessment, Eleanor continued. During our merger with Eastern Financial, integration testing inadvertently created a pathway between personal investment accounts and corporate holding accounts in specific cases where account identifiers matched certain patterns. Yours was one of 17 accounts affected, though you were the only customer to discover and report the issue. The vulnerability existed for approximately 72 hours before your report, David added. We've found no evidence of exploitation beyond your test transfers, but we've taken all systems offline as a precaution while implementing emergency patches. Thomas, the legal representative, cleared his throat. Miss Reynolds, while we appreciate your intention to report this vulnerability, your methods have created significant complications. The demonstrated transfer of $4.2 billion triggered automatic reporting to federal banking regulators and financial crimes units. We're now under investigation by 4 separate agencies. I understand your position, I replied carefully. But after multiple attempts to report through proper channels failed, I needed to demonstrate the severity in a way that would trigger appropriate attention. Yes, well, you certainly achieved that, Eleanor said dryly. Our stock has dropped 17% since opening. Several major clients have initiated transfers to competitor banks. The financial press is speculating about everything from hacking to embezzlement. David leaned forward. From a technical perspective, we're interested in how you identified this vulnerability so quickly. Most customers would have assumed a display error and contacted customer service without testing transfer capabilities. I develop financial tracking systems professionally, I explained. The error codes and account linkage patterns were familiar enough that I could identify possible causes. The conversation continued technically, with David asking increasingly specific questions about what I'd observed. His initial skepticism transformed into professional respect as I detailed the exact system behaviors that had revealed the nature of the glitch. Our technical discussion was interrupted when Eleanor's phone rang. Her expression darkened as she listened to the caller. I understand. We'll address it immediately. She ended the call and turned to me. Miss Reynolds, a concerning development has emerged. Somehow, your name has been linked to this incident in financial circles. A reporter is specifically asking about your role in discovering the vulnerability. My stomach dropped. How is that possible? I haven't spoken to anyone. Eleanor and David exchanged glances. There are limited possibilities, David said cautiously. Internal leak, regulatory source, or someone who knew you were involved. Eleanor finished. My sister's words echoed in my mind. Jackson says Central Atlantic's stock is already dropping because of this technical issue you supposedly discovered. My brother-in-law works in finance, I said slowly. I mentioned discovering a banking vulnerability during a phone conversation with my sister yesterday. She didn't believe me, but may have relayed the information to him. Thomas, the lawyer, immediately straightened. This complicates matters significantly. Public disclosure of banking vulnerabilities before official statements can constitute market manipulation if trading occurred based on that information. I didn't disclose technical details, I clarified. My sister dismissed my explanation entirely as delusional. I doubt she provided actionable information. Eleanor's assistant entered, handing her a tablet displaying a financial news website. The headline made my blood run cold. Amateur hacker exposes billion-dollar vulnerability at Central Atlantic. The article didn't name me directly but described a female customer with basic technical knowledge who had attempted to transfer billions in corporate funds after discovering a catastrophic security flaw. Eleanor set down the tablet. Miss Reynolds, we need to control this narrative immediately. Our communications team is preparing a statement acknowledging the technical incident without details. We'll need your full cooperation, including signing non-disclosure agreements regarding all aspects of this situation. I understand confidentiality requirements, I agreed. But I also need resolution regarding my personal accounts. I literally have no access to any funds, including money unrelated to this incident. Your accounts remain frozen pending regulatory review, Thomas stated flatly. Standard procedure in financial incidents of this magnitude. But I need. My explanation was interrupted by my ringing phone. Amanda again. Excuse me, I said to the executives before answering. Amanda, I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back. Morgan, what have you done? Her voice was shrill enough that I had to move the phone from my ear. Jackson just called me from his office. The trading floor is going crazy with rumors about some woman who tried to steal billions from Central Atlantic. His firm had significant positions in their stock, and they're taking massive losses. He says if this gets worse, his bonus could be affected. Amanda, I can't discuss this right now. I'm literally in a meeting with bank executives. Bank executives? Her tone shifted from accusatory to uncertain. You're actually at the bank? Yes, at their headquarters. I told you this was a real situation. But, Jackson said, this looks like some kind of hacking attempt. That's not what you were describing. I discovered a security vulnerability and reported it. That's exactly what I told you yesterday when you accused me of having a mental breakdown. Silence stretched for several seconds before Amanda spoke again, her voice smaller. Morgan, Mom, and Dad are really worried. I told them you were having some kind of financial crisis that was affecting your thinking. The executives exchanged uncomfortable glances as Amanda's voice carried across the conference room. I have to go, I said firmly. I'll call you when I can. As I ended the call, Eleanor regarded me thoughtfully. Family complications? My sister doesn't believe I could discover a banking vulnerability. She's convinced I'm either lying or delusional. David raised an eyebrow. Despite your obvious technical expertise? She's never taken my career seriously, I admitted. In her worldview, I'm her struggling younger sister, who needs guidance rather than a professional with specialized knowledge. Eleanor nodded with surprising understanding. Family dynamics can be complicated. Now, regarding next steps, we need your continued cooperation during the investigation, full confidentiality, and your availability for technical consultations as we implement permanent fixes. And in exchange? I asked. We'll release your unaffected accounts within 24 hours, provide compensation for the inconvenience, and ensure regulatory authorities understand your role as a good faith reporter of the vulnerability rather than an exploiter. The meeting continued for several more hours as we discussed technical details, signed preliminary agreements, and established communication protocols. By late afternoon, I had a clearer picture of both the vulnerability's scope and my precarious position in its aftermath. As the car returned me home, my phone displayed 37 missed calls and messages from family members, old college friends, and even former colleagues. Somehow, word had spread through my social circles about my involvement in a banking incident, transformed by rumor into everything from heroic whistleblowing to criminal hacking. The most concerning message came from my mother. Morgan, we're cutting our trip short and flying home tomorrow. Amanda says you're having serious problems and we need to be there. Please call us when you can. My parents were interrupting their anniversary trip because Amanda had convinced them I was in crisis. Despite the actual circumstances vindicating me completely, my family still viewed the situation through the distorted lens of their preconceptions about me. As I entered my apartment, exhausted from the day's tensions, my phone rang once more. The display showed Dad Mobile, too, my father, calling from Europe. I answered, prepared to explain yet again that I wasn't having a breakdown. Instead, his first words stunned me. Morgan? It's Dad. Is it true you discovered a banking glitch worth billions of dollars? It's all over the financial news here. The international perspective had apparently granted my father distance from Amanda's interpretation, allowing him to see the situation more objectively. Yes, Dad, I said, tears of relief forming. That's exactly what happened. The next morning, a sharp knock at my door startled me awake. Through the peephole, I observed two men in dark suits, flanked by uniformed security personnel, wearing Central Atlantic Bank identification badges. Tightening my robe, I opened the door cautiously. Miss Morgan Reynolds? The taller man presented credentials, identifying him as Special Agent Wilson from the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. We need to ask you some questions regarding recent activities involving Central Atlantic banking systems. My apartment suddenly felt very small as 4 people entered and surveyed my modest living space. The second agent, introducing himself as Matthews, seemed particularly interested in my home office setup visible through the bedroom door. Miss Reynolds, we understand you initiated a transfer request for $4.2 billion from Central Atlantic's corporate holdings account yesterday. Agent Wilson began once everyone was awkwardly positioned around my small living room. I initiated but did not complete that transfer, I clarified, maintaining composure despite being questioned in my pajamas. It was a controlled demonstration of a security vulnerability after multiple attempts to report the issue through proper channels were dismissed. So you admit to accessing a restricted corporate account? Matthews pressed. I didn't access anything intentionally. My personal investment account was erroneously linked to corporate holdings through a system integration error. I discovered this vulnerability and attempted to report it. The questioning continued for nearly 2 hours, growing increasingly technical. I detailed each step of my discovery process, the failed reporting attempts, and my reasoning for the demonstration transfer. Agent Matthews took extensive notes as I described specific system behaviors that revealed the nature of the vulnerability. You seem unusually knowledgeable about banking system architecture, Wilson observed. I develop financial tracking systems professionally, I explained for what felt like the dozenth time. Identifying anomalous behavior in financial interfaces is literally my job. The interview might have continued indefinitely, if not for an unexpected interruption. My laptop chimed with an incoming video call request from Eleanor Blackwood, the COO I'd met with the previous day. The agents exchanged glances as I explained who was calling. Answer it, Wilson directed, moving to stand behind me, out of camera range. Eleanor's face appeared on screen, flanked by David from cybersecurity and several new executives I didn't recognize. Miss Reynolds, we've been trying to reach you. Our legal team has prepared the confidentiality agreements we discussed, and, she paused, noticing my expression. Is everything all right? Miss Reynolds is currently being interviewed by federal agents, Wilson stated, stepping into view. Eleanor's expression tightened. Agent Wilson, I presume? I'm Eleanor Blackwood, Chief Operations Officer at Central Atlantic. We were expecting your agency to coordinate with our legal department before approaching Miss Reynolds. This is an independent investigation, Miss Blackwood, Wilson replied coolly. Perhaps, but Miss Reynolds discovered and reported a vulnerability in our systems as a good faith actor. Our technical team has confirmed her account completely. We've provided this information to your superiors. An older man moved into the camera frame, introducing himself as Harrison Montgomery, Central Atlantic's CEO. Agent Wilson, we've just concluded an emergency board meeting regarding this incident. Miss Reynolds's actions, while unorthodox, prevented what could have been a catastrophic security breach affecting billions in client assets. We're treating her as a whistleblower who deserves protection, not a suspect. The atmosphere in my apartment shifted perceptibly. Agent Matthews whispered something to Wilson, who nodded. We'll continue this discussion at a later date. Miss Reynolds, Wilson stated, gathering his materials. Please remain available for further questions. After they departed, I remained connected to the video call, now joined by Thomas, from legal and several senior executives I hadn't met previously. Miss Reynolds, I apologize for that uncoordinated approach, Montgomery said. Our technical team has completed their preliminary investigation, and your account of events has been fully verified. The vulnerability was created during our merger system integration and has now been completely patched. Eleanor added, our senior systems architect was particularly impressed with your detailed analysis. He said identifying that specific error pattern would typically require intimate knowledge of our proprietary systems. I work with similar architectures, I explained. The error signatures were recognizable. Indeed, Montgomery nodded. Which brings me to our next point. We'd like to offer you a consulting position to help review our entire security infrastructure. Your unique perspective could be invaluable. Before I could respond, Thomas interjected. Before discussing any arrangements, we need to address the confidentiality agreements and settlement terms. We've prepared documentation for your review. The conversation shifted to legal matters, non-disclosure agreements, consulting terms, and compensation for the inconvenience I'd experienced. The figures they proposed were substantial, clearly designed to ensure my cooperation and discretion. Additionally, Eleanor added, we've expedited the unfreezing of your personal checking and savings accounts. They should be accessible within hours. Your investment account will require additional regulatory clearance, but we're prioritizing that process. As the call concluded, I felt a mixture of vindication and exhaustion. The bank that had dismissed my concerns now sought my expertise. The vulnerability I'd discovered had been confirmed at the highest levels. Yet my family still largely believed I was experiencing some kind of breakdown, and my professional reputation hung in an uncertain balance. My contemplation was interrupted by another knock, gentler this time. Through the peephole, I recognized my next-door neighbor holding a newspaper. "Morgan? You might want to see this," she said, handing me the financial section. "Isn't that your bank?" The headline was unmistakable. Central Atlantic faces regulatory scrutiny after unprecedented security incident. The article described a system vulnerability that potentially exposed billions in corporate holdings and mentioned that a customer with technical expertise had discovered and reported the issue. While I wasn't named directly, the piece noted that the individual acted as a whistleblower rather than an exploiter, according to anonymous sources within the bank. I thanked my neighbor and closed the door, settling onto my couch to read the full article. Buried in the third paragraph was a detail that made my stomach drop. Central Atlantic stock had fallen 23% since the news broke, erasing nearly $7 billion in market value overnight. My phone rang, Amanda again. I considered ignoring it, but decided confrontation was inevitable. "Morgan, are you watching the financial news?" Her voice lacked its usual condescension. "I just saw the newspaper," I replied cautiously. "Jackson's been in emergency meetings all night. His firm had significant positions in Central Atlantic, he says." She hesitated. "He says the details match exactly what you described to me. About finding a vulnerability that linked to corporate accounts." "Yes, Amanda. That's what I told you before you decided I was having a mental health crisis and called our parents." For perhaps the first time in our adult relationship, Amanda seemed at a loss for words. I didn't think it was possible. The idea that you could find something like that seemed so unlikely. "Because you've never respected my professional capabilities," I stated simply. "You've always seen me as your struggling little sister, rather than a competent adult with specialized expertise." Silence stretched between us. Finally, she asked, "Is it true you've been meeting with bank executives?" "Yes. They've verified everything I reported and offered me a consulting position." More silence then. "Mom and Dad land in 3 hours. They've been worried sick, thinking you're having some kind of breakdown." "A breakdown you convinced them I was having," I reminded her. "I thought I was helping," she said defensively. "The things you were saying sounded delusional from my perspective." "They sounded delusional because you've never bothered to understand what I actually do professionally, Amanda. You've been so convinced of your superior life choices that you've never considered I might have valuable skills and knowledge in areas you don't understand." I heard her inhale sharply, preparing what I assumed would be a defensive retort. Instead, after a moment, she said quietly, "Maybe you're right. Jackson says what you found should have been impossible for an ordinary customer to identify. He says you must have exceptional technical understanding to have recognized the vulnerability's nature." Coming from Amanda, this qualified as a monumental admission. "We should talk more when Mom and Dad arrive," I suggested, softening slightly. "I think we all have some misconceptions to address." As we ended the call, my email pinged with a message from Central Atlantic's legal department. The subject line read, "Confidential, Settlement Agreement and Consulting Proposal." The crisis that had begun with a simple need for $150 was transforming into an unexpected opportunity. But the greater transformation might be happening within my family, as the sister who had always looked down on me was finally beginning to see me clearly. 3 hours later, my doorbell rang. Outside stood my parents, looking travel-worn but relieved to see me, and Amanda, whose usual confident posture was notably diminished. Her husband Jackson hovered awkwardly behind them, checking his phone compulsively. "Morgan!" My mother embraced me tightly. "We've been so worried. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Mom," I assured her, ushering everyone into my apartment. "There's been some confusion about what's happening." My father studied me carefully. "Amanda said you were having financial troubles, then started making claims about banking conspiracies. But then we saw financial news mentioning Central Atlantic's security issues." "It wasn't a conspiracy," I explained, gesturing for everyone to sit. "I discovered a legitimate security vulnerability in their system during the merger integration." Jackson looked up from his phone. "The trading floor has been chaos for 24 hours. Central Atlantic stock is in freefall. Regulators are involved. If what Amanda told me is accurate, you're the one who found the glitch?" "Yes. While trying to access my accounts to fix my car," I confirmed. Amanda cleared her throat. "Morgan, I think you should explain everything from the beginning. For everyone's benefit." There was something unusual in her tone, a deference I'd never heard before. I realized this gathering wasn't just about alleviating our parents' concerns. Amanda had orchestrated it as an opportunity for me to correct the narrative she'd created. I detailed the sequence of events. My car breaking down, needing $150, Amanda's refusal, discovering the glitch, the failed reporting attempts, and finally the demonstration that triggered security protocols. "The bank has verified everything," I concluded. "They've confirmed I discovered a legitimate vulnerability that could have exposed billions in corporate assets if exploited maliciously." My mother looked confused. "But Amanda said you were having some sort of breakdown." "I made an assumption," Amanda interjected, surprising me. "When Morgan called asking for money, then started talking about billions of dollars in her account, I didn't believe her. It seemed more likely she was confused or fabricating a story than actually discovering a major banking vulnerability." "Why would that be your first assumption about your sister?" my father asked quietly. Amanda shifted uncomfortably. "Because it seemed impossible that Morgan would discover something so significant. She's always been." She hesitated. "Quieter, less accomplished in conventional ways." "Less accomplished?" My father's eyebrows rose. "Morgan graduated with honors in computer science." "Yes, but—" Amanda gestured vaguely around my modest apartment. "Look at her lifestyle compared to mine. I assumed financial success reflected capability." "That was always your metric, not mine," I pointed out. "I've chosen to live simply, despite having substantial assets." Jackson's head snapped up from his phone. "Substantial assets? My company went public last year. My stock options were worth millions. I just never flaunted it like some people might." Amanda's face flushed. "You never said anything. Would you have believed me?" I challenged. "Or would you have assumed I was lying or confused, like you did about the banking vulnerability?" The room fell silent. My mother looked between us, realization dawning. "Amanda, have you always been this dismissive of your sister?" Amanda opened her mouth to deny it, then closed it again, uncharacteristically reflective. I suppose I've always seen Morgan as needing guidance. The little sister who couldn't quite measure up." "Based on what evidence?" my father pressed. "She doesn't have the house, the social connections, the visible trappings of success," Amanda answered, then added more softly, "But I'm starting to realize those might not be the only metrics that matter." Jackson set his phone down. "Amanda, Morgan discovered a vulnerability that bank security teams missed during integration testing. That requires exceptional technical understanding that most people, including financial professionals like me, simply don't have." Before Amanda could respond, my phone rang, the bank's executive office calling again. I excused myself to answer. "Miss Reynolds? Harrison Montgomery here. I'm calling personally to inform you that our board has approved the settlement and consulting arrangements we discussed. Additionally, All your accounts have been unfrozen effective immediately. Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. I appreciate the prompt resolution. There's one more thing, he continued. Given the exceptional nature of your discovery, we'd like to publicly acknowledge your role, with your permission, of course. The media narrative is shifting toward speculation about hacking, and we prefer to highlight this as responsible vulnerability disclosure by a technically proficient customer. I considered the implications. I'm open to limited acknowledgement, provided it focuses on the technical aspects rather than personal details. Of course, our PR team will coordinate with you before any releases. And Miss Reynolds? Several members of our executive team are quite impressed with your capabilities. There might be opportunities beyond the initial consulting arrangement, should you be interested. As I ended the call and returned to the living room, 4 pairs of eyes watched me expectantly. That was the CEO of Central Atlantic, I explained. All my accounts have been unfrozen, and they've approved a substantial settlement plus consulting arrangement for my role in discovering the vulnerability. Jackson whistled softly. Corporate settlements for security disclosures can be significant. It is, I confirmed, without elaborating. They also want to acknowledge my role publicly to counter hacking speculation. You're going to be publicly recognized by one of the country's largest banks for your technical expertise, my father stated, pride evident in his voice. Amanda stood abruptly and walked to the window, her back to us. When she turned, I was shocked to see tears in her eyes, something I couldn't recall witnessing since we were children. I owe you an apology, Morgan, she said quietly. Not just for dismissing your discovery, but for years of condescension. I've been so convinced of my superior choices that I never considered you might have succeeded in ways I couldn't even recognize. The admission hung in the air, decades of sibling dynamics crystallized in a single moment of vulnerability. Why was it so important that I be less than you? I asked. Genuinely curious rather than accusatory. Amanda considered this, then answered with unexpected honesty. Because your different choices made me question mine. If your path was valid, focusing on substance rather than appearance, authentic work rather than social positioning, then maybe the life I constructed so carefully isn't as perfect as I need to believe. My mother wiped away tears. Oh, girls, I had no idea things were this strained between you. It's been this way so long we stopped noticing, I said gently. Amanda needed to be the successful sister, so I accepted the role of the struggling one. It was easier than challenging the narrative. Even when that narrative was completely false, my father observed. Morgan, why didn't you ever tell us about your financial success? I shrugged. It didn't seem important to correct people's perceptions. I know my worth regardless of others' opinions. Jackson's phone buzzed again. He checked it, then looked at me with newfound respect. Central Atlantic just released a statement praising the technical expertise and ethical responsibility of a customer who identified a critical security vulnerability. They're not naming you specifically, but they're definitely positioning this as responsible disclosure rather than a security breach. Amanda approached me hesitantly. Can we start over somehow? Not completely, but could we try to see each other more clearly going forward? It wasn't a perfect apology, but from Amanda, it represented significant growth. I'd like that, I agreed. Though it might take practice for both of us to break old patterns. I could use some financial advice, actually, she admitted, shocking me further. Jackson and I have been over-leveraged trying to maintain appearances. This market volatility has hit us harder than we're letting on. This vulnerability, Amanda acknowledging she might benefit from my expertise rather than just my deference, felt more meaningful than any formal apology. I'd be happy to help, I offered. Financial systems are my specialty, after all. As my family stayed for dinner, ordered from a nearby restaurant using my newly unfrozen accounts, our conversation flowed more authentically than it had in years. The bank vulnerability had exposed not just financial systems weaknesses, but the fragile foundations of our family dynamics, creating an opportunity to build something more genuine in their place. 1 month later, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my blazer, before heading to Central Atlantic's headquarters. The transformation in my life since discovering the banking vulnerability had been swift and comprehensive. The settlement had been finalized, including substantial compensation and a lucrative ongoing consulting contract to review their security infrastructure. My phone chimed with a text from Amanda. "Good luck today. Dinner this weekend to hear all about it?" I smiled at this new development, regular, voluntary communication with my sister, without the historical undertones of judgment or competition. Our relationship remained a work in progress, but the fundamental dynamic had shifted toward mutual respect. The bank's handling of the incident had evolved from initial suspicion to professional recognition. After verifying my account of events, they had completely overhauled the vulnerability I'd discovered, implementing multiple additional security layers to prevent similar integration errors during future mergers. More surprisingly, they'd brought me in as a consultant to review their entire security framework, a role that had expanded as my recommendations proved valuable. Today's meeting would formalize a more permanent arrangement, potentially as head of a new vulnerability assessment division. The financial aspects had been equally transformative. Beyond the substantial settlement, the specific terms of which remained confidential, the bank had publicly acknowledged my role in identifying the critical flaw. While they never disclosed the exact nature of the vulnerability to prevent copycat exploitations, their press statement had praised the responsible disclosure by a technically sophisticated customer. This public recognition had opened unexpected professional doors. Financial institutions across the country had reached out about security consulting, speaking engagements, and advisory positions. My expertise, previously recognized only within specialized circles, had suddenly become broadly valued in the financial sector. My parents had returned to Europe to complete their interrupted anniversary trip, but not before a series of conversations that reset our family understanding. My father had expressed both pride in my accomplishments and regret for not recognizing my professional path as equally valid to Amanda's more visible success. "We always knew you were smart," he'd admitted during a private moment before their departure, "but we didn't understand the value of what you do because it wasn't as easily measured as Amanda's achievements. I'm sorry for that blind spot." As I gathered my materials for the meeting, I reflected on the most significant change, my relationship with Amanda. The confrontation in my apartment had triggered a genuine reassessment on her part, not just about me, but about her own life choices and values. 2 weeks after the incident, she'd invited me to her home for the first time in years, not for a formal dinner party with her usual social circle, but for coffee, just the two of us. Her mansion, which had always been showcased with meticulous attention to appearances, showed subtle signs of relaxed standards. A child's toy left on the stairs, coffee mugs in the sink. "Jackson and I are downsizing," she'd announced without preamble. "This place, it's exhausting, maintaining the image it represents." The market volatility after Central Atlantic's stock drop affected his bonus significantly. "We're not in trouble, but it forced us to evaluate what we actually need versus what we think we should have." "That sounds healthy," I'd offered cautiously, still navigating our new dynamic. "It's your influence, partly," she admitted. "Seeing how you've built genuine success without showcasing it, it's made me question what I'm trying to prove with all this." She gestured around her impeccable living room. "We're different people with different priorities," I reminded her. "Your choices don't have to mirror mine to be valid." She'd smiled wryly. "That's remarkably generous considering how often I've invalidated your choices." Our conversations since had gradually evolved from cautious reconnection to genuine exchanges of perspectives. Amanda had even asked for my financial advice regarding their planned downsizing and investment restructuring, a request that would have been unthinkable before the banking incident. The doorbell interrupted my reflections. My scheduled car service from the bank had arrived. As we drove downtown, I reviewed notes for the meeting while periodically checking email on my phone. The media coverage had finally subsided after weeks of financial analysts dissecting Central Atlantic's security incident and its market implications. My driver pulled up to the now familiar headquarters building. Unlike my first visit, there were no journalists camped outside, no sense of crisis emanating from the staff. The security officer at the executive elevator greeted me by name. No identification required. Eleanor Blackwood met me in the reception area, extending her hand with a warmth absent during our initial tense interactions. Morgan, good to see you. The team's eager to discuss the security framework revisions you proposed. I've refined some of the implementation recommendations based on your technical team's feedback, I explained as we walked toward the conference room. Excellent. Harrison is particularly interested in your thoughts on integration protocols for future acquisitions. Your identification of the vulnerability during our last merger has completely changed our approach to system combinations. The meeting progressed productively, technical discussions interspersed with broader strategic considerations. When we broke for lunch, Eleanor mentioned casually, "By the way, your presentation to the board last week has resulted in some significant internal changes. They've approved a complete restructuring of our security division with substantially increased funding." "That's encouraging," I replied. "The vulnerabilities I identified weren't just technical, they were structural and procedural." "Precisely. Which brings me to our proposal." She slid a folder across the table. "We'd like to offer you a permanent position heading a new division focused specifically on vulnerability assessment and integration security." The offer inside exceeded my expectations, both in terms of compensation and organizational authority. It represented not just financial opportunity, but professional recognition at the highest level. "This is generous," I acknowledged. "I'll need time to consider how it aligns with my other commitments." "Of course," Eleanor nodded. "Take whatever time you need. We're convinced you're uniquely qualified after witnessing both your technical capabilities and ethical approach to the situation." That evening, I called Amanda to share the developments. Her genuine excitement for my opportunity contrasted sharply with her previous dismissiveness of my career. "They're smart to want you permanently," she observed. "Most executives would never have identified that vulnerability, even with technical backgrounds." "It's definitely tempting," I admitted, though I'm weighing it against some of the independent consulting offers. "Whatever you decide, we should celebrate this weekend. Small dinner at our new place? We're closing on the downtown condo next week, part of the downsizing we discussed." "I'd like that," I agreed, still marveling at the evolution of our relationship. After we ended the call, I stood at my apartment window, contemplating how a simple request for $150 had catalyzed such comprehensive change. My car, now properly repaired, had become a footnote in a much larger story about recognition, family dynamics, and the unexpected ways our perceived limitations can be shattered. The banking vulnerability I'd discovered had exposed not just financial weaknesses, but interpersonal ones, in my family, in corporate structures, in how we assign value to different types of knowledge and success. The system integration error that briefly showed billions in my account had ultimately revealed something more valuable: the possibility of rebuilding relationships based on authentic understanding rather than established patterns. As I prepared for bed that night, my phone chimed with an email notification: Amanda sending property listings for apartments near her new downtown condo. "In case you're considering a change of scenery too," her message read. "No pressure either way." I smiled at this subtle indication of our new beginning. The $150 car repair that had started everything now seemed almost comically small compared to the changes it had precipitated. Sometimes the most significant transformations emerge from the most ordinary moments, a reminder that we never truly know which small decision might unexpectedly alter everything. What seemingly insignificant moment changed your life in unexpected ways? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If you enjoyed this journey from family drama to banking scandal, please like and subscribe for more unexpected life lessons. Share this with someone who might need a reminder that sometimes being underestimated can lead to your greatest opportunities. Thank you for coming along on this wild ride. May we all find the courage to stand in our expertise even when others doubt us.